Hi, my name is Brandon Elrod, and this is Podcast 2, the TED Talk Evaluation. My TED Talk was by Oliver Sacks, who's a neurobiologist, and discovered the newer genre of what's called neurological anthropology. And his TED Talk was about what hallucinations can reveal about our minds and how we think. And it focused mostly on what's known as Charles Bonnet syndrome, or Charles Bonnet. He has an accent, so it's kind of hard to understand the pronunciation. But the thesis of the speech was uh, hallucinations, when people have them, usually perceive themselves as going insane, and that's what doctors may misdiagnose them as. But what can happen is when visually impaired or um, hearing impaired, 10% of people from each of those categories actually hallucinate to make up for what they're lacking. Um, and unlike psychotic hallucinations, these hallucinations uh, have no association in your brain with anything. They don't interact with you. That's actually more like watching a film. Whereas psychotic hallucinations actually interact with you and berate you and are usually quite negative. Um, I think Oliver Sacks captured my attention and the audience's attention because he was sitting in an old style chair and talking very much like a grandfather would talk to a child. It was almost like being regaled with a story. And although it's not very dynamic, I'd probably actually give him a 4 for dynamism because it was just so engaging the way he drew in his audience, even though he was sitting down the entire time. It was the way he spoke that kind of captured everyone because you wanted to listen to him. He like maintained this entire sort of grandfather telling a story by the fire mentality throughout the entire speech, and um, it really drew the audience in. And he told a lot of jokes and um, had a lot of anecdotes about things he's seen with his patients hallucinating and you know, all these misdiagnoses that happened. And it was interesting to see because most speakers like Ken Robinson are very, they stand up, they move around a lot, they tell jokes, they're very active, whereas Oliver Sacks was very sort of down to earth, just sat and talked, which I really enjoyed. What I learned about delivery based on watching Oliver Sacks was you really don't need that much motion and visual effects or visual aids to really grab the audience because he had no visual aids, absolutely none. He had a bottle of water and his notes that he was reading himself, and it just was more captivating than any of the other TED Talks that I watched while deciding which one to do this presentation on. As far as the TED commandments go, um, I'd say one of the biggest ones that he really captured was making the complex plain, because this is like very detailed neurobiological science. It had a lot to do with parts of the brain I've never heard of, and he was telling the audience about the effects of this syndrome and what parts of the brain it affected, but at the same time, it wasn't overwhelming, and I understood all of it. I was never lost once while he was talking. Um, he never really talked about himself. He never flaunted his ego. Um, he made sure to end his talk on time. And I think if I was going to give my classmates tips based only on my TED Talk, it's that you do not need visual aids, and you do not need um, a lot of energy and charisma to really capture an audience, because that's what Oliver Sacks did. Um, that's all I can say. I really enjoyed his speech, and I enjoyed talking about it to you. So until next time, I'm Brandon Elrod, and this is my TED Talk Evaluation podcast. Good night.